much, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it is truly an honor to be here tonight to rise in this House to talk about such an important bill, Bill S-210, Protecting Young Persons from Exposure to Pornography Act. This act is to restrict young persons' online access to sexually explicit material. Tonight I am honored because we have talked about pornography in this place before, and we recognize the impact of pornography, the impact to our youth, and why it is important that we sit down and actually talk about this. I want to talk about why we need to do this, and a lot has to do with unintentional viewing of pornography by our youth. And that is why we're here today. It is to talk about what we can do to put in place to ensure that when our children are turning on their laptops, when they are looking at their videos, that they are not going and turning into a pornography, that the next thing that's coming on is not something that is sexually explicit. I recall back in the 42nd Parliament having the opportunity to speak to Motion 47. Motion 47 was looking at pornography and was put forward by our colleague, and that was studied at committee. Motion 47, I spoke to it because I had my own experience, and it was with my son following, watching a commercial that I'd watched on Air Canada. I shared this story back in, I think, 2016-17, but I think it's worth sharing again. And it has a lot to do with something so simple turning into something so wrong. And it started off with a simple underwear commercial on Air Canada. This flight, as I was coming home, I was watching two men talk to one another, and they were just talking about how cozy they were and how life was so good. And then when it zooms back, it's two men talking inside of a pair of underwear, and they are representing testicles. And, you know, to me, that's just what it is. But they were talking about how comfortable they were. To me, it wasn't pornographic, it wasn't sexually exploitative, it was just a really great way of selling a pair of underwear. I thought I would show my son and my husband, so I go home, click on the TV, and go on to one of the sites. And that is when, after showing my family this video that I thought was so hilarious, that it turned into soft porn. And that is when that's when I personally subjected my own child without knowing. And so if I, as an adult user, well, please don't, I shouldn't say this, because don't take that against me, and to the Winnipeg, member from Winnipeg, that is true. But we have to look at how simple something like this can happen. And so it happened to me as a mom, and then we know that it happens to children. 62% of children have reported that have seen pornography, that their first encounter with pornography was unintentional. 62%. And why is that important? That is important because what does pornography do to a child? And so I'm sorry, I said 62, it was actually 63%. Coming from that, they looked at what the issue was, and it was children having access to pornography. When surveying parents, 83% of parents have suggested that there should be a robust age verification. And that is why I'm going to put on my Status of Women's hat now. I have had the honor to working on really important files since 2015, working with the Status of Women, working as the Shadow Minister for Women and Gender Equality, and understanding the correlation between pornography and sexual violence and acts. And a lot has to do with understanding that 41% of these children who have seen pornography have indicated that it has had a negative impact on their own relationships and their views of the opposite sex. We know that when it comes to misogyny, patriarchy, when it comes to sexual violence, a lot of this is an empower balance. And that is exactly what we see in pornography. So what children are seeing is something that is not reality, but instead they are seeing something very fictitious, very fantasy-like, and then their brains, their maturity, and being able to take this information and have it processed in their brains, it becomes a reality. And in turn, in time, they find that this sexualness, the things that they do become okay. It becomes normalized. And these are things that we should be really caring about. I watched an incredible video, or an incredible documentary. We also had it here. It was called Over 18. And it was focusing on a young boy and different things about a family who were dealing with a child and other children who had come into contact with pornography. And it was showing in this documentary this young boy sitting at the parents talked about the fact that they were sitting in the same room while he was watching pornography. Children become addicted to this kind of stuff. And we know what happens with addiction, what happens to the brain. And we have to know that when we are dealing with young children and we are messing up with their brains in the development, what happens down? 87% of the scenes that you see in pornography are violence against women. 87%. Now, I'm not saying anything about pornography, this or that, on what we should do about adults, but I'm talking about children. The fact that children will see 87% of these acts will be violence against women. This is the stuff that's going into these kids' brains. Is this what our children deserve and need? According to many researchers and studies, children and adolescents may become more vulnerable to effects of pornographic content, and in turn, with their lack of experience and development, they develop an idea of what sex is, and it becomes inappropriate and violent and selfless. Women are considered tools for men's pleasures, and pornography provides violent aggression where they believe this becomes acceptable. Pornography becomes a role model, which leads to unhealthy relationships. And when we talk about violence against women, one of the biggest things we talk about is prevention. So let's start young. Why are we not starting with our young children and ensuring from the time they are young that they understand consent, and that things like pornography should not be put into their brains until they're an adult, where they can make right decisions and right choices and understand relationships, understand who to touch, when to touch, how to touch, and understand that consent. Pornography does none of this. It is not something that we can do and say it is a way of sexually educating our children. It is a way of educating our children to something that is extremely dismissive of women. This is why I want to lead to teen dating, and this is exactly where we're talking about. A child watches this information, and then we have to see what happens. How do they take the information that they have? How do they process it? And how do they react in their relationships? And teen dating, there have been so many studies done on teen dating showing the correlation between pornography and violence, specifically young women who are being forced into sexual acts and impacts their unsafe sex. We know that there is this obsession with sexual fantasy and aggressive behavior, and unfortunately, young women become the victim of that pornography, or become a victim of those acts. Pornography, once again, is not sex education. It does not provide real-life sexual experience on relationships. And that is why it's so important that our children are not having to see this by accident. I want to read to you something that was written by Michelle Yeager or Dr. Michelle Yabar and Kimberly Mitchell. I'll ensure to the interpretation. I will send those because I probably have said them wrong, so you won't be able to speak and say what they say. But I would like to read to you a little bit of the information that I have on here. And it's the impact of sexual activities and overall behavior. Pornography use and aggressive behavior in the classroom was found to be significantly correlated with higher consumption levels and associated with more aggressive behavior. Exposure of pornography at a younger age makes individuals receptive to watching coercive or violent porn. Watching more hardcore pornography containing abuse, rape, and child sex is associated with normalizing this behavior. Over time, the embarrassment that may follow from having pornographic interest or engaging in pornographic behaviors may internalize itself, resulting in a decline in mental health and general life satisfaction. Pornography can excite the brain's reward system, which can lead to severe brain alterations akin to those found in drug addictions. Compulsive sexual behaviors are also linked to early pornography exposure. By showing an absence of emotional connection between consensual couples, unprotected sexual contact, and occasionally violence and rape, pornography normalizes sexual harm. Male adolescents may learn that it is okay and even desire to act violently and aggressively toward and degrade their female partners from the aggressive and violent depictions of women that are prevalent in today's pornography. And I read this because I think it's something that we all have to be aware of. We hear of the sexual violence all of the time. Right now, there's statistics, and I wish I could give you an exact statistics, but it's ranging right now between 70 and 80% increase in sexual violence. We need to do something about this. And prevention is one piece, and this is what this bill does. It works on prevention. It is just one of the multiple tools that we can use. I also want to read to you a section, and this is from the Center of Sexual Exploitation, the National Center of Exploitation. Aggressive acts against women in pornography occur in roughly 87% of the scenes, and that is something I brought up earlier. Pornography acts as a form of sexual education, teaching the lesson that female sexual partners ought to enjoy these physical acts, such as hitting, gagging, slapping, or non-consensual sex. I do not think that there is a single member of Parliament in this place that would agree that that is what we want for Canadian children. And that is why I'm here today to say to everybody and to ask for your support of this really, really important bill. And now I'll actually get into the bill. I've talked about why we need this bill, so what is this bill? And I will let the member from Avalon know I'm about to fill you in on this bill. This bill is ensuring that we have age verification. We already know that there are some countries using this. We have countries, we have Germany, France, and the UK, three that I can cite. And there are a number of states that are also putting in these types of age verifications. In Germany, they looked at different ways. There's 3 different ways they can do it. And I think there's 100 different providers. There's all of these incredible things that we can do. And technology will lead our way. We know that with age verification that we need to ensure that privacy is protected. And by using, whether it's a third party or a third party person to verify, we need to ensure that information is not passed on for privacy reasons. And there are a multitude of corporations, or of ISP providers or of third-party providers that can provide this type of verification. It's all about the safety of our children. It's all about the safety of their brains, their development, and in turn, the healthy relationships. So in Germany, as I said, they've got some great work that's being done there. In France, they have also passed different pieces of legislation, and some of the principles are in order to reconcile protection of privacy and youth protection through the implementation of online age verification systems for pornographic sites. They take it into details, and I wanted to put this in here too, because for many people, privacy is probably the thing that they're most concerned about. I think everybody understands pornography in children, no. But privacy is sometimes the things that we have to look at. So some of the principles that we must focus on when we're talking about how we ensure that age verification can be done, there has to be no direct collection of identity documentation by the site publisher from the pornographic site, no age estimates based on the user's web browsing history, and no processing of biometric data for the purpose of uniquely identifying or authenticating a natural person. There's all of these different things that can be done. And I think if we look at the technology today, we can even look at the fact that when COVID came in March of 2020, within weeks, we were all online in Zoom. This is all about technology, and there are people out there that can do this work. And I am asking everybody to get on side so that people will be able to do this work. Sorry, I do have more in here, but I think what I want to do is kind of end it off with a very simple piece. And it's a piece on how this started in the United States. And I think what's really important is Billie Eilish. I don't know who knows Billie Eilish in here, but I'm sure if you're under 30, you've probably listened to a Billie Eilish song. All I know is she's a Grammy Award-winning person who has some blue hair once in a while, but she has spoken the truth. And what I really appreciate about this is that she has talked about her own experience. And I want to quote from this. It was December 2021, and Chagall was on her daily news scroll through Apple News when she saw an article describing pop star Billie Eilish's appearance on the infamous Jock show. And this was the Howard Stern show that she had appeared on. Eilish told Stern, and I quote, "I used to watch a lot of porn. To be honest, I started watching porn when I was like 11. I think it really destroyed my brain, and I feel incredibly devastated that I was exposed to porn so early." This is important because we're just talking about a normal individual, somebody that so many young people can relate to. So many people that look at somebody like Billie Eilish and would say, look what this young woman has done with her life. What an incredible artist. These are the words of her. And so when we're looking at mentorship, I think that we should, as parliamentarians, think of the words of Billie Eilish and support this legislation so that we can ensure our children are safe. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourman for Down Valley East.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the member for her words. I think this is an issue that deserves our attention in the House. And I do have 2 daughters, so I do know who Billie Eilish is. But in all seriousness, I remember reading a book called The Empire of Illusion by a professor at the University of Toronto called Chris Hedges, and there was a whole chapter on this subject. I think it was called The Illusion of Love. And it talked about this exact subject and what it does to young men and how it exploits young women. So I think that, everything you said today, I think most members in this House, I think all members in this House would agree that we need to do more. You talked a lot about age verification. Can you give it as an example on how that actually works? Thank you very much.
The honourable member doesn't want me to give him an example, but I do want to remind him he's to address all questions and comments through the chair and not directly to the members. The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you very much, and I really do appreciate that. There are just different systems being used in different countries, and age verification, a lot of times it's a third party that they're going to be providing a token just to verify that that person is of age. People have talked about using their MasterCards because you can't get a MasterCard till you're older. Or visas or whatever it is. I'm not just trying to do one charge card. But I think we also recognize that children do use our charge card, so we have to figure out something that's a little bit better. To be honest, I would say, can I say to you, what is the best, or can I say to the member, through you, what is the best method? I don't know what the best method is, to be honest, and that's why it's so important that we take this to committee so that we can look. I believe that if this token system is the best, as we've talked about, then we've got to put it in there for these measures to protect children now. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I think our colleague knows that we will support this bill. Nevertheless, I have two questions. First, a question about, well, today it seems like it's hard to control things. Servers can be located anywhere. It seems hard to enforce laws within a country, but I'd like to know what she has to say about that. And second, how come it took so long? There was a case in Montreal, and how come it took so long to have this, that we're having discussions on this here in the chamber?
Middlesex, London.
Thank you very much. I'll start off with part two. This bill was originally brought forward by the Senator in November of 2021. So we've been working on this bill to make sure that it could get into this place. But you know something? Good question. But I think as technology changes, that's when we become much more aware of those holes in the system, those gaps in protecting our children. The questions that part two. Can I ask him what part one of the question was? Part one of the question. You guys remember?
Sorry, it's just... I'll allow him to do it very briefly, but it's just that it does eat into a time for questions. So,
just a brief reminder.
The honourable member, could you repeat the first part of the question? Quickly, I was wondering, how can we ensure adequate control? Because everything online right now can involve servers located in different places.
Sex London.
Thank you very much. Sometimes I need that kind of reminder. So we know that VPNs are a concern. So if you're using a VPN, you can go in any country, so it's going to be bypassing some of that. This is exactly why we need to take this to committee, so that we can talk about the technology, we can talk about all of these gaps in our systems, and that we can find ways of finding these solutions. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? A brief question. The honourable from Nanaimo, Lady Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member. I have to say I'm 43 with 2 kids, and I'm a fan of Billie Eilish. But my question is, in particular, the member spoke about the prevention side and the tools to protect children from access to online pornography. And I'm wondering if the member could share a little bit more of her thoughts around the importance of children having access to comprehensive response delivered by a responsible adult sexual health education, both in our schools and in our communities.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London has 50 seconds to respond.
Not a problem. For me, it really depends, and I believe sexual education is really, really important. But we also have to recognize the maturity of the child, and at what time do you start introducing different things. Consent should be, when it comes to consent in children, should be taught from the time that they are 0. When to touch a person and when not to touch a person. That's the simple kindness and the simple rules of respect. So I believe that it is something that we should be incorporating into our children, specifically at home, at the very beginning of their age. When it comes to school, we'll continue to work on that, but that is a provincial issue. Thank you.